Hi everyone, can everyone hear me? Great, let's get started. Hi everybody and welcome to our webinar. Today we will be discussing accessibility in libraries and archives. My name is Joanna. I am an MSI student focusing on community archives.
And I'm Claire. I am an MSI student focusing on public libraries. So today we're going to cover a few different things. We're going to start by talking about what accessibility is. We'll talk a little bit about ableism, the ADA regulations, and then we'll discuss how we can improve accessibility in libraries and archives.
So we'll just start with a few definitions so we have a better idea of what's going on here. So accessibility refers to the ability of all persons to easily obtain or use something. This something can include a space, materials, or information. For today's webinar, we will be focusing on accessibility for people with mobility challenges. So this means persons who move around with assistive devices such as canes, walkers, wheelchairs, power chairs, crutches, etc. As librarians and archivists, we need to consider, do we have ramps to help people enter our building? Do we have elevators to access different floors? Is there sufficient signage to show people where these ramps and elevators are located? We need to think about the height of our reference desk, if someone in a chair would be able to see over it. We need to see if the tables in the reading room are wheelchair friendly. And if there's automatic doors that people can walk through without having to hold them themselves. So along with this goes ableism and ableist thinking. Ableism is defined by the Center for Disability Rights as a set of beliefs or practices that devalue and discriminate against people with physical, intellectual, or psychiatric disabilities, or physiatric disabilities, sorry, and often rests on the assumption that disabled people need to be fixed in some form or another. By not taking the time to consider how all persons will be able to utilize the services and information we offer, we are ourselves feeding into ableism. So universal design comes up a lot when we're talking about ableism and accessibility. So universal design is a way to combat ableism and ableist thinking. Universal design is the idea that we should design spaces, materials, access systems so that everyone can use them. When you make something accessible to people with disabilities, you make it usable by everyone. To illustrate this idea, we have a little cartoon here wherein the able-bodied person pats the person of a person in a wheelchair on the head saying, "So what's the matter with you, dear?" And the boy in the chair points to a set of stairs with no ramp in sight and says, "Apart from your attitude and these barriers, you mean?" So essentially, the boy is pointing out that the only problem here is the able-bodied person's ableist thinking and the stairs bearing his way.
Now we're going to cover some regulations that exist for making spaces more accessible to those with mobility impairments. The Americans with Disabilities Act was passed in 1990. It's a civil rights law that prohibits discrimination against individuals with disabilities in all areas of public life, including in the workplace, in schools, in transportation, and in all spaces that are open to the general public. The Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA, paved the way for the inclusive designs that we see today in our city buses, public buildings, and other public spaces. Its goal is to accommodate those with disabilities so they may fully engage in public life. It is the reason that it is now common to see handrails and ramps for those with mobility impairments today. The ADA defines accessibility for workers. Title I of the ADA is intended to help those with disabilities access employment opportunities. It also states that employers must provide reasonable accommodations to qualified applicants. Reasonable accommodations can include accessible parking, providing a modified workspace, providing accessible versions of software necessary to the position, modified working hours, extended breaks, and more. If a job requires an applicant to stand for long periods, bend, lift, or other mobility-related tasks, this should be made clear by listing it as a requirement for qualification on the job posting. The ADA also defines accessibility for the public. Title III of the ADA prohibits discrimination against individuals with disabilities in public spaces. This sets the standard for accessible spaces in the construction of new buildings and the modification of existing buildings, which may need barriers removed, ramps added, or other modifications. This also directs employers to make reasonable modifications in order to serve their guests as equally as possible, including taking steps to accommodate those with vision, hearing, and mobility impairments. Here's another example. It is often the case that employers in both the public and private sectors will meet the minimum requirements for the ADA compliance, but will not go above and beyond to make their guests feel welcome and included. The following slides are a selection of recommendations from the Association of Specialized Government and Cooperative Library Agencies on how to better accommodate those with mobility impairments. First, it is important that the staff are open and listen to the guest's needs. Staff can simply ask, "What is the best way that I can help you?" to give the guest an opportunity to request special accommodations. Staff should be available during all operating hours to assist with retrieving and carrying items, holding open doors, moving any barriers, and other tasks as requested. Staff should be trained to locate, use, and instruct visitors in the use of all assistive technology on site. If your workplace does not provide assistive technology, you may want to ask, or if your workplace does provide, you may want to know where it's located. Do you know how to use it, and could you explain its use to others? Staff should also be trained in how to assist those with mobility impairments in the event of an evacuation and during any drills that might take place. Think about how you would assist your guests. Some of the ways in which we can make an environment more welcoming to those with mobility impairments fall under simply being kind and considerate. Always offer a seat to those using canes, crutches, or walkers. I would take that further and say that it's a good idea to always offer a seat to anyone if you're going to be speaking to them for more than a short moment. When speaking to someone in a wheelchair, again, if it is for more than a short moment, find a seat and place yourself at their eye level. These are just a couple of ways you can be more respectful and considerate and make someone more comfortable. Some more advice here is a quick reminder: do not touch or move an assistive device. If necessary, you can ask permission from the person using it. And I think it's really important to note that if you feel you're not adequately trained to handle something, ask your institution to implement training. If your workplace does not provide training in these areas, there are other resources you can explore, and we'll cover some options for that a bit later in the presentation. Although the responsibility for making sure that you are prepared to serve guests with disabilities does fall on your employer. So it's always good to ask them first before taking this responsibility on yourself. All right, so we have an interactive activity here. If you'll open up your chat box, the next slides will show you a photo and ask you to describe in the chat what you notice about these as it relates to accessibility. Does anyone have any questions? All right, let's get started. Here's a ramp from Robson Square in Vancouver, Canada, and it's built in the stairs into the stairs so that if you look at it at a certain angle, you can't really tell that the ramp is there. Does anyone notice anything else about this?
So Stacia says that it's a crazy long ramp and not helping you to get up it quickly, that there's no rails around the ramp either. That is something very good to point out. Zishi mentions that it's pretty cool looking. Rachel notices that it would be hard to turn a device around those corners. That is a pretty good observation. I can't actually tell how much room is there, so it might actually be pretty hard. Gina also notices that there's no rail and that the design's not very practical. Another person says that it's intended to blend in with the stairs so that people can walk up together, but says that it looks dangerous. Kristen says that there's no speed bumps when the chair makes the turn. So if the chair gets away from you, you're going to fall off the ramp. That is a really good point.
Connor makes a really good point that the stairs are supposed to be hidden, and it makes it seem like it's something that doesn't belong or should be hidden, and that is something that is common in ableist design. The idea that the ramp shouldn't be there is actually pretty common.
Hannah thinks that architecturally it's pretty cool looking, and she gets what they're going for, but says that it might not be the best execution. Intent versus impact, yes, absolutely.
Yep, we have another one for you here. This is the Kansas Historical Society's State Archives. We have a couple photos. Anything you notice? Stacia makes a great point. The reference desk is a little high.
Hannah says that it is too hard to get around and in and out of the aisles, and that there's no way that her mom and a scooter would be able to do that without bumping into things.
Yes, and in between the tables, especially if a chair was left pulled out or something, it would not be possible to get through there.
Gina notices that the seating options are pretty limited, which could be an issue with certain people with conditions or motor disabilities.
And Kristen makes a good point here. There must be an elevator, but it's not in the picture. And if you'll also notice, there's no prominent signage as to where an elevator might be.
Yes, this is actually a brand new building. This is them showing off their facilities. I actually pulled these pictures from their website. So it's very interesting, the things that we're noticing here. Does anyone have anything else to add for these pictures before we move on? So Stacia says that maybe they think an escalator is all they need.
All right, we have one last one for you. This is from the Bentley Historical Library stacks. Is there anything you notice?
So Connor right away says that doubling up on the desk being too high, it looks like there's a sign on top of it. Okay, so that was probably for the previous question.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Stacia notices that, is this the public stacks?
No, this is for the staff. Mm-hmm.
Yes, it is an extremely tight space. So maybe something to consider here would be workers who have mobility issues who need to be getting into the stacks. That is a really good point, that it doesn't look like there is enough space between the shelves to safely get a ladder up to the higher shelves. I actually haven't been back in the stack, so I don't know if they have like a little step stool or something. Kristen says that lifting things can be written into job descriptions, and you could modify job requirements for someone who had physical disability, like excluding retrieval from their job responsibilities.
Yep, that would fall under Title I of the ADA, reasonable accommodations.
Yep, and Stacia also agrees with that.
Mm-hmm. So just some themes to consider. Is the ramp too steep for wheelchairs? Is the handrail placement convenient? Is the space wide enough to accommodate wheelchair maneuvers? Is a worker available during all operating hours to assist people who need assistance? And can people in chairs see over your reference desk? That was one thing a few people pointed out.
So we do have some recommendations for you all. We hope that you'll find them helpful. So if your institution does not include training for serving patrons with disabilities, you can always ask for it. There's usually a list of resources or places to contact for more information. There is an online training course that's called At Your Service that we can send you a link for that if you're interested. And then, of course, there's more and more things that we could add to this. You can also check the SAA guidelines and make sure to look for updates. The most recent publication of this is from 2019, so it's fairly recent. You can also seek input from your patrons and keep universal design in mind. So with that, what questions do you have for us? Yes, we will be posting a link for that in the chat. Yes, okay. This one.
And we can send everyone a link to our slides as well that will have the hyperlinks in it. But we are posting that training webinar in the chat. Did anyone else have any other questions? So Hannah says, I think public libraries are trying to get better at this. My mom uses the library all the time and they've been really, really good to her about helping her retrieve items when she's unable to herself. That's great.
Thank you for your input. Stephanie says that there is no way to predict when someone gets hurt or their abilities can change. What can libraries do to prepare for changing circumstances? I would personally say just having something in your policy to make sure that you're in line with the ADA and Title I. Make sure that you can make changes to their job description to make everything more equitable for them. That was a really good question, Stephanie. Thank you. Yes, this webinar was only about the mobility considerations, and there are indeed much more inside of the ADA. And the SAA guidelines also cover many more different kinds of disabilities as well. So I'm seeing a lot of people in the chat saying that this hit pretty close to home for them. So thank you for coming.
Before we go, is there anything anyone would like to add that we did not cover? Okay, so there's a link to our evaluation form on the Canvas page. We can send you a link as well. All right, so you should be seeing that in the chat. Did everyone get that? Okay, great.
Thanks everyone for coming. We hope you enjoyed this. If you have more information or you would like more resources from us, please feel free to contact us.
Thank you. Have a great night, everyone.